Welcome to our live walkthrough of the Data Standards Cloud and Adobe Experience Manager. My name is Casey Powell and I am the Digital Event and Content Manager here at Claravine. So today we'll be taking a look at how the Data Standards Cloud can take your Adobe Experience Manager to the next level so that you can move faster, simplify collaboration, and better measure performance. So moving on to our speakers today. Joining me from Claravine, we have Elisa Riley, the Director of Product Marketing, and Adam Hennings, Director of Product Management. Again, welcome, and I will pass it over to Elisa.
Thank you, Casey. We know today's audience has a mix of familiarity with Claravine, our content and creative solutions, and our Adobe Experience Manager connector. The primary focus of this call will be a walkthrough of our integration. However, to ensure we're all working from a common foundation, I'm going to start by providing a 5-minute background on the challenge this integration is meant to address and how our platform, the Data Standards Cloud, is set up to address it. At that point, I'll hand things over to Adam to show how this connector activates standards across both asset and site data, and how the utility of this data can be extended across your broader workflows. Finally, we'll reground in some of the benefits, and we'll leave time for Q&A at the end, so please add any questions to the chat as we go. Before we get into features and functionality, let's talk quickly about why the challenge this integration addresses is so important and how we're thinking about approaching these. And you'll see a quick poll come up that just speaks to how many hours a week you're spending cleaning up bad data. That'll just help us think through how this challenge is really impacting your teams if you get a chance to respond. So today, teams like yours are in a really tough spot. They're being asked to do a lot more with a lot less. Marketing budgets are tightening, but content needs are rising as more of that budget that still exists is being funneled into digital channels that really need to be fueled by content. And to support content needs, marketers are investing in content and messaging and campaign creation and management. But this means more content and creative, and also means more teams collaborating across workflows in a growing number of systems like Adobe Experience Manager. All of that leads to an increasing volume of content and creative data that your business needs to manage, a challenge that can't be ignored because it creates real cost for your business. Basically, don't be that little person up there with a tidal wave of data that's problematic data coming for you. Now, if you're on this call, you're probably already feeling a lot of this pain. You may see a lot of asset waste in your organization, either because teams can't find what they need or they struggle to use the assets they have correctly. One Adobe study found that 88% of marketers want easier discovery and sharing of assets, and 64% struggle with content duplication. Points around customers have validated. And poorly executed naming and tagging slows teams down. When you can't find what you need, there can be a lot of back and forth, and teams may use the wrong asset in the wrong spot. This doesn't just add a few hours. We've talked to brands frustrated by 12+ days until content is active in market. And all of these issues also mean subpar customer experiences, because when this data isn't complete or detailed or accurate, it's almost impossible to execute successful personalization, on-site search, or recommendations, and kind of forget about the more complex machine-driven strategies you may want to try. That said, the number one frustration point we're hearing from customers is not being able to prove the value of those creative efforts, those efforts they're pouring so much investment into. One brand we've talked to has to do so much data fixing, finding, and stitching that they were seeing 30+ days for these types of insights, which really made them almost unusable. And as identifiers become less available, it's going to be vital to have immediately usable creative level data that you can quickly tie to campaign level performance, so you can actually prove ROI on these types of efforts. So that's a lot of challenges, but this isn't a presentation about doom and gloom. We're here today to talk about solutions, specifically our Adobe Experience Manager connector. We believe that content and creative data actually presents marketers with a huge opportunity, because as the way we measure and attribute shifts, your content and creative data can actually provide the key across campaigns for richer insights and more effective action. So the data in Adobe Experience Manager is really a treasure trove if set up and used correctly. And at Claravine, we help major brands and agencies take control of data like asset and site data through standards. We enable this by approaching data challenges differently through our platform, the Data Standards Cloud. First, we empower a proactive approach to bridging data silos, including across your content, creative, and campaign data. We centralize cross-team collaboration, so workflows and handoffs are faster and less error-prone. And we enable automation of data flows across tech, like in the instance of this Adobe Experience Manager connector and some of the other integrations that we'll call out as a part of this workflow. Just as a quick example, and Adam will go deeper into this, the way that this kind of comes to life is in our platform, you can establish your content and marketing taxonomy specific to your teams, channels, and needs. And then in the step 2, you set up connected templates. So different data sets that ensure your teams are creating complete data up to your standard and enriched with the dimensional data you need, but with common keys across them. For example, a creative ID or name. That way, when data is captured or sent from our platform directly to your downstream solutions, it immediately adheres to your pre-established data dimensions and can be easily connected together in your analytics and BI layer. This approach means you can apply standards to your asset data and site data in Adobe Experience Manager, helping you identify problem spots in this data and improve it at scale. But we can also ensure you're getting more from this data across your various workflows and analysis. This makes content and creative a common thread for success that extends across all your teams. So yes, content and creative teams can experience simplified asset data validation. They can reduce time spent finding and duplicating assets, but your marketing and ad ops teams can also speed up CMS and site creation workflows or see faster, more reliable handoffs using consistent asset naming. Your CX teams can connect content and creative data to enable experimentation, improve SEO, and personalize experiences. And your analytics and BI can connect creative asset data to performance data, adding dimensions for measurement and a real-time feedback loop for creative.
So today we're going to talk a lot about the Experience Manager connector. And so Experience Manager has a few modules inside of it, but really the two that we build integrations to is really the DAM, or the digital asset management part of Experience Manager, as well as the CMS that's actually managing web pages that's ultimately driving the consumer experience. We have connections into both. I'm going to be showing you a little bit about how that works. And this then connects those teams that we just were talking about, whether it be content creative, the marketing and operations folks, the consumer experience as well, being able to see all of this data that is now going to be standardized and of high quality, and then actually be making that accessible to your data science teams, your business intelligence teams, the analytics teams, all to sort of drive that next insight that you're after. And so here is that workflow that I sort of just mentioned here, but this is it applied to Experience Manager. And if you're not familiar with our product already, we really have two types of integrations, one of which we call an inbound integration, the other of which we call an outbound integration. And so what you see here on the left side of your screen is our inbound integration to Experience Manager. And what you're able to do there in an inbound integration is you can connect to some data source, in this moment, of course, Experience Manager, and automatically and programmatically copy a lot of that data into Claravine, such that you don't have to do exports, you don't have to mess around with any of that stuff. We just put in the parameters of the integration that you or the data that you want out of Experience Manager, and we will programmatically go and grab that information and bring it into Claravine. That can happen. You can connect it in different data sets. And so one of those data sets you might have about content fragments inside of Experience Manager. Another you might have about image assets inside of Experience Manager. And the other of which might be web pages. And you can really, inside of Claravine, you can go in and configure your data sets to match really the structure of data that you are targeting. So image data is going to look a little bit different than web page data. You might have different attributes that are associated to images that aren't associated to web pages. So you would separate those inside of different data sets. Inside of our product, we have templates that allow you to build that structure. And ultimately then connect the teams that are really responsible for a lot of this data to each and every one of those data sets through roles and permissions, and the way that we are able to segment data for each and every team and be sure that the right data is being seen by the right team. We as well will connect that to our standards and taxonomy. So inside of our product, we have a feature called lists. That's an example of a taxonomy. It's a bit of a more advanced version of things. And so you can, in effect, validate a lot of the data that you have inside of Experience Managers through the DAM or through the CMS against your taxonomy. And we can highlight moments where that piece of data doesn't match your vocabulary. It's out of standard. We have a variety of other different data validation tools as well. They could be more simple, like you just need to have some title of some asset be only this length, because if it isn't that length, then potentially a downstream system might not be able to use it, or it might present differently inside of a consumer experience. We have a wide sort of degree of different ways that you can validate the data. And then ultimately you can send that data out to any number of destinations. In this moment, we would want to send it back to Experience Manager through an outbound integration. That part of our integration is coming up for beta here shortly. We'll talk a little bit more about that too, but you can also send it to Adobe Analytics, maybe Google Analytics, maybe to S3, maybe your data science team is really hungry for a lot of the metadata that lives on each and every asset, so that they can build data science models from a lot of metadata, which really high degree or high quality metadata is really a requirement in order to build a really effective model. And so this is a little bit of a zoomed in version of what you just saw. Before I sort of jump into the product and walk you through what you're seeing here, I want to sort of just conceptually go over how I've gone about designing a template. And this moment, really what we're gonna do, and I'm gonna show, is a data set that really is targeting specifically images and metadata about an image. And then also images that live within a certain subdirectory of Experience Manager's digital asset management system. And so we would connect a inbound integration. We would apply a filter to that integration. In this moment, like I mentioned, we're going to say we're going to want assets from a particular folder, as well as a particular type of asset. In this moment, we're going to target JPEG images. This will happen 3 times daily. It sits on autopilot. We will constantly be sort of looking for any updates that are happening inside of the digital asset management side of Experience Manager, and ultimately relaying a lot of those updates into Claravine. And then once it's in Claravine, here's a couple examples of how we can connect this to lists. And so in this moment, we have a piece of metadata called asset type, as well as tags. Those are connected to lists, which again are your pretty much the set of terms that you need to have all of the metadata match. And so when we notice things that don't match this, we'll highlight them in red. I'll show you a little bit about how that works. And again, we can ultimately send data back out to Experience Manager, to S3, as well as we could even do emails. I know we talked a little bit about the different parts of Experience Manager, one being the digital asset management side of Experience Manager, but as well, we have the CMS. And again, I'll walk you through a bit about how this looks inside of the product, but just know that really there's a web page template that we have set up that is designed in a similar way, where we have a set of metadata, and we're ultimately syncing that data back into Claravine. And so with that, I'm going to go ahead and pop out of here, and I'm going to go ahead and open up the product. Just as well, for just to give you a little context here, this is We Retail. It's a demo site that Adobe provides. This is powered through Experience Manager. So the images that you see here are in the DAM. The web pages that you see like presented to you right now are built from the CMS. And here's a look inside of, so I'm sure this interface will look familiar to everybody here. This is a look inside of the DAM part of Experience Manager, where you can see a lot of the images that are all here. And so if I were to want to go over and take a look at, this image, which is here on the home page, this woman running, here is that very asset inside of Experience Manager. And over in properties, this is where a lot of the metadata is stored. And so we have a title, we have a description, I have added some custom metadata here, but that is what we're targeting. That's what we're going to ultimately go in and try to be bringing back into Claravine. The first thing that you're going to want to do when you're setting up this integration is really first build that connector, which is really a way to save the authentication credentials that allow us to really log in to your instance of Experience Manager. And so the way you do that is from settings, and you open up the sub navigation tab to integrations, you go to accounts. And this is where I have set up a bunch of different connectors. I already have one of these set up. I'll walk you through a little bit about what details I provided in order to build this connector. And your moment, you would want to go in and actually create a new one. Here for Experience Manager, the things that you configure your connector, configure on your connector are really the name that you want to give it. We see pretty consistently that Experience Manager or customers have two different instances of Experience Manager, one for production, one for staging. So you can set up two different connectors to really connect to either instance. You would put in the username and password that we use in order to access the instance itself. And really also the server location, the actual web address where this particular instance of Experience Manager lives. Again, this is another way to differentiate in the example I gave with production and staging. You can differentiate between the two and sort of tell us which place to go to. So this is all done all through a no-code sort of way. This is all something you can set up when you have Experience Manager enabled for your account. After you have the connector set up, the next step would be to create a template. And this is a long list of templates. I'm going to go in and actually open up a template that I've already have created, which is in the mirror image of this design that I just walked through with everybody. And so you would give it a name, give it a folder, some of the basic setup stuff. Over here, we're going to take a look at all of the fields that I have on this particular template. These are all going to match really the field set that you see here. Some are going to be just simple text fields. Others are going to be linked to lists, again, to validate whether or not any value in that field matches the vocabulary and matches the taxonomy that you have set up for content. And so you can add any number of these really into your heart's desire, right? And this is going to be probably different for different types of data, as well as each and every organization. You might have metadata that's associated to one industry that's not to the other. And so you can configure this. All of this is highly can sort of match your requirements. Once you have all of your fields set up that you want to capture and collect about, in this moment, image assets, JPEGs, you go in and connect this template to Experience Manager in this moment through an inbound integration. Again, I have something already set up here that I'm just going to walk through. This is just a name for the integration. Sometimes, people have many different integrations on their templates and want to differentiate them so that you can give them a name. You can as well select the connector. So, what we just set up prior was the connector. You might have multiple connectors. In this moment, we're going to connect this template to this demo environment that I have set up. The next is what type of data do you want to sync into the product? When we talked about the DAM side of Experience Manager as well as the CMS side, inside of the DAM, you're going to be syncing assets. Inside of the CMS, you're going to be syncing pages and any of the metadata that's associated to the page. So this is where you would make that selection. Here's our schedule that this will run on in an automatic way. So this is going to happen again 3 times daily. We'll always be checking for new updates that are happening inside of the DAM or inside of the CMS and be bringing those updates into the product. Here is our filters that we can apply. Again, in this moment, I'm targeting JPEGs, and I want to as well target JPEGs that are inside of this particular folder inside of Experience Manager. So again, here we're going to filter data because we don't need all of the assets. We only need JPEGs that are inside of this folder. You could as well filter by a tag if you care to. In this moment, we don't need to, but that's an additional option. Lastly, the field mappings. And so what you're going to see here on the left is all of the properties or all of the fields that you might have set up on assets. And these are all going to be AEM oriented property names. And you could add another one if we wanted to here. You can sort of pick from a long list of different properties that we support. Or if you want to, we actually have means to extend the out of the box set of properties from Experience Manager. So if you custom configured your AEM instance, we can go in and actually build those custom properties into our product as well. So pretty much all of that metadata is reachable. And then over here on the left, this is where the destination, this is where I'm going to ultimately import the data to. And so this is all of the setup. Now let's take a look at what it looks like once data actually makes it into Claravine. So here is that very same template that I just had built. Thus, it sort of walked you through the configuration of. But here's the data that we have gone and retrieved from Experience Manager. So you'll notice one thing, a couple things just to sort of call out here. One of which is that this path is sort of where the actual file is inside of the DAM. All of these assets that you're seeing right now, all are within that folder that I had configured as a filter. What's more is that we are only seeing JPEGs. So if I were to have changed that filter and said, I want PNGs, I would only be brought back PNGs. We have a bunch of different, fields here. You'll notice I have asset title, asset description, some of this other information. We were taking a look at this image a little earlier. The woman running in the woods. Let's go ahead and find that particular item in this data set. There's that image itself. There's the description to it. You'll notice asset type is empty. We have a data validation rule, or we have a standard where we want to have each and every asset have a type. And that's exactly what we see over inside of Experience Manager. There is no asset type configured here. We have options, but we don't have anything configured, which means it's a signal to us that there's something that we need to go off and fix inside of that data. I'm going to go ahead and just remove this filter, take a look at these all. And you can sort of browse through this. We're highlighting things where we notice our tags are out of standard, where we mandate that there be a title, there be a description, there be an asset type. You can see us bringing back some extra information about language and things like that. But really the next step for you, that you might ask is, okay, well, how do I go and sort of make a bulk update to what I see here? And so let's go and say, I want to make an update to all of the images that are inside that I know to be a product image. And so what I'll do here is I'm just going to go and apply a filter to give me everything that is in the product folder. So let's go ahead and filter down all my fields. If they're my rows here, that looks good. And then we're going to say, give me everything that doesn't have, oh, excuse me, I need to reverse that. There we go. So now I'm looking at everything inside of the product folder that doesn't have an asset type associated to it. Now I can then go and grab all of these records and then start to make edits on them. And so what you're seeing here is that sort of subset of data that I just targeted to my criteria that I'm after. And then I would go in here and maybe in this example, I need to go ahead and give it a product image as its asset type. And I'm going to go ahead and just sort of make this update all at one go. We're going to bring these, give this all an asset type of product image. You would have to go and sort of, go and correct some of these other cells that have been highlighted here as red. But you can do this all in bulk. And then once all of these issues have been resolved, you're going to see this button light up for you, which means that all the validation issues have been resolved. And then you can submit that. And then that's really what's going to trigger all of the outbound destinations that we have set up here. So in this moment, when I want to send that data back to Experience Manager, might also want to send it to S3, as well as send an email, let people know that this action has actually happened. You can attach files to emails as well. So that's a little look at the data set all about image assets. What does this look like for web pages? So in a very similar way, here is me and a template that I have set up to bring back a lot of the metadata that I have associated on web pages. There's many more of these have titles, thankfully. We notice that a lot of them don't have descriptions. So we need to go off and actually enter in descriptions. We know that descriptions are going to be helpful in the information that Adobe Experience Manager indexes in its internal search, as well as we might want to use them for site search, just generally when you're searching around a consumer site, as well as all the tags that we have associated here too. You see we're bringing back tag information as well. So the same philosophy is true here. You might have a certain subset of these pages that you want to work on in this moment. You would use filters in order to narrow in on whatever section of data that you're after, and then ultimately go and select all of those records, make the updates that you want to make. All of this data then sort of moves back through the same workflow that I just mentioned for the image asset template through back to Experience Manager as well as S3, and maybe in this example, having an email sent with a file attachment. So that's how we execute, this use case to standardize creative and content metadata. Now if you sort of think about what we have going on, we have asset data now inside of Claravine, and that is particularly interesting. And that's interesting. Let me go ahead and sort of show this, because now what is potentially possible here is you can leverage the asset data that you have structured that follows your standard, and you can associate it to maybe other templates that might need to have it, or you might want to add it to. And so in this moment, what I'm showing here is that this template, which we just went ahead and built, and we now have data inside of Claravine about assets that includes titles and types and all this other information that would be super helpful. You can now relate it to maybe another template that you already have being worked on. And we commonly see a lot of our customers building tracking URLs. And one of the things that we hear a lot about is getting to that next level of granularity, or get that next level of measurement, specifically creative level or asset level measurement. What's now possible is that I can relate the images that I'm now adding to Claravine to other templates. And I can relate them through, in this moment, I'm using an asset ID, but I might want to, on each and every tracking URL, I might want to have someone enter in which particular asset is being used so that I will know the performance of that asset. I can link these two templates together, and then I can have someone select what asset is being used, and as well as bring in all the other dimensionality that you might want from a campaign, from a placement, from an ad. This is really just for a sample and sort of for demo purposes. There's a lot of metadata on campaigns, placements, and ads that you don't see here, but you would add it here as well. And then ultimately you can have someone, as they are going through the normal workflow of building a tracking URL, add in one other field to input, which is the asset that's being used. And that then will give you the additional level of granularity in your measurement. That, we can use in this moment, this example, we have a lot of customers that are using Adobe Analytics. So you now are able to send and connect the creative and asset data into classifications inside of Adobe Analytics for you to do analysis from. Or again, maybe you're going to send it to S3 and for your reporting inside of Snowflake or inside of Redshift or whatever it might be. So I'm going to jump back out of this really quickly. I just want to show you a little bit about what this looks like. So I have a asset level tracking URL, that template here, which is pretty basic for sake of demo. And I'm just going to show you that now there's all of these other data sets that are actually being leveraged in order to create new rows inside of this template. So in this moment, again, you're going to see some sort of dummy data here. But what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to say, okay, this particular URL that I'm creating is related to this campaign. Actually, I'm going to build a few of them at a time. I'm going to build 9 of these URLs all at once. I know that there's going to be some number of these URLs that are going to be related to a particular placement. There's another one with these other placements. As I'm entering this information here, you're going to see some of these relationships actually happen live. So in this moment, we brought across the campaign name. Of course, you might bring across many other items about a campaign that you would want to send or collect data for. Same story for placements. But this other field here, asset ID, if you have knowledge of which asset's being used and you know that ID, you can now start to actually enter in information about that asset. And you're going to notice that we're doing lookups against the data set that contains all of the asset metadata. So in this moment, there are 2 links that I'm going to be building that are this majestic rainbow image is going to be used on. I'm bringing across some asset type information too. Maybe I want to do performance measurement on what type of asset is being sort of clicked on more commonly. All of this stuff will be possible, and you can create any number of these. You're going to see all of this stuff is all available to us inside of a dropdown. And we're building these all with different pieces of creative. And then ultimately we would put in some landing page here. And I'm just going to put in Claravine. And once I go and I click submit, what's going to happen is I'm going to get a tracking URL created, which I then will be able to use inside of campaigns. And when that actual link is clicked, we're going to be collecting data about all of this. All of this data, if it were to be mapped to classifications, for example, inside of Adobe Analytics, each and every one of those clicks is going to be related to all of this dimensional data. And so you can sort of start to imagine, that you can start to take a look at engagement data related to any individual asset, or maybe a certain category of assets, whatever it might be. But this is now how you sort of can take the next step beyond just going and standardizing content metadata just generally, but you can now take this next step and relate the asset metadata you have inside of Claravine on other templates, so you can get even more and get further along that journey toward creative or asset level measurement.
Before we jump back into this, Adam, there was a question in the chat and one that came in through Q&A, which may be helpful to address now. Sure. Before we get to the end. One was, can you give more examples of how this could be used for free text fields as opposed to controlled vocabs?
Yeah.
I don't know if that gives you enough to go on, or if you have any clarifying questions.
Yeah, so when it comes to text fields, let me just go, and while I'm sharing here, I'm just going to sort of go and create a new text field really fast. I'm going to create a brand. We have all of our fields are inside of a field set. I'm going to create a demo field set here. And I'm just going to give you a sample of some of the other things that we would have. So here's a sample field. And what the first thing might be for a free text field, one, you can just require it be filled in. But then you might want to evaluate, well, what are the contents of that free text field as well? So in this moment, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to set up a field, and I'm going to set up some set of validation rules against it, where I'm going to, one, require it always be filled in. And then I can also apply rules like it must begin with this particular string, ABC. It must end with this other particular string, XYZ. Maybe it needs to contain a certain phrase or a certain word inside of that field. Maybe it needs to exclude letters, numbers, spaces, symbols. You can put in a custom exclusion here. You can validate it for length, whether it's a minimum or a maximum. Again, you know that a lot of that, there's a variety of different reasons you might apply any one of these rules, but when it comes to like free text fields, there's a set of these rules that we will validate for along the way. Hopefully that answers that question.
One was, which I think will speak kind of to the outbound side of things, but instead of attaching a document to an email, can you supply the direct link back to the asset in the DAM, so redirect to the single source of truth?
Yeah, so let me go back to this, and by all means, feel free to ask another question here, and we can sort of dive into that too. But in this moment, this on the left-hand side here is our inbound integration. Over here is our outbound integration. And so I can configure a template to connect to multiple things through multiple outbound integrations, one of which could very well be the source where the data originated from. So in this moment, I would be sending data that was originally copied from Experience Manager back into Experience Manager. So like in essence, you could remotely manage DAM, like digital asset data, all from Claravine. You wouldn't have to open Experience Manager if you didn't want to. And you can configure it to, only stare at certain fields, only stare at certain subsets of digital assets, whatever it might be. But those updates will make their way back into Experience Manager, all when you click that button, submit. And so that's like an example of one of the outbound integrations. That one, again, is one that we are just about to open up for beta here in about 4-ish weeks or so. So we have, what you just saw is us running through the inbound integration. So that's one we're really close on, we're really excited about. And so again, if you have interest in learning a little bit more about that, definitely encourage talking to our customer success group, or as well our sales group.
And then the final one, I think you just spoke to this a little bit, but this may be because of some of the icons used. So it was asked, is this mostly about Google Analytics? It would seem like the Adobe stack would be a lot easier to kind of integrate with this. I know we also have our integration to Adobe Analytics and some other Adobe products. If you want to speak more to that, Adam. But
we know that our customers are heavy users of Adobe Analytics, no doubt. And so we have an Adobe Analytics integration where we can connect a lot of what you just saw to Adobe Analytics, if that's where you were to want to send the data. In this example that I gave, we see that a lot of the way that our Adobe Analytics integration is used is to really build what Adobe Analytics calls a classification, which effectively means that all this data, this metadata that you're associating to any one link that you're including inside of a campaign, ultimately will be able to be like segmented on and filtered on and et cetera inside of Adobe Analytics. And so we would totally encourage, and we think there's a lot of value to actually pair these integrations together. This is sort of one way that you might think about doing that, is this template here is all built from Experience Manager data, but we could send it out to Adobe Analytics too. We also know that we see a lot of ccustomers that have an implementation of Adobe Analytics plus Google Analytics. So maybe you want to send it to both places. So those options are all available to you. Like we have a high degree of flexibility in where you send data. But yeah, like I think just generally you're going to get the more you're using integrations, the more connectivity you have from data that lives inside of Claravine. I think generally speaking, the more you're going to get out of it.
Now that you've seen how this works, we want to get you thinking about some of the ways this integration could benefit you, whether you're implementing a content taxonomy for the first time, trying to improve how it's put into action, or maintaining it during the system migration. So as you saw in the demo, our connector integrates with asset data, so you can easily view this data even at high volume, then validate and correct it. So if search and discovery within AEM is a challenge and you're feeling overwhelmed by this type of data issue, this is a place that our platform can be a huge help. Or if you aren't meeting your SEO potential, you're doing everything else right, but you feel like you're being limited by all of this data, our platform enables you to apply standards and edit title tags, metadata descriptions, and more, which really helps you better optimize for search. You may also find that missing or inaccurate page data disrupts on-site experience and personalization. As Adam showed, our platform enables templates for web page and data tagging at scale. And another closely related issue is ineffective site search, filtering, or recommendations. These tools have all become essential functionality, especially for businesses with large product and media catalogs. And again, they all rely on metadata. By getting this info right, you can help customers find what they're looking for or what you want them to look for much faster. Naming also creates a special type of pain during the handoff from creative to ops. And this was that area that Adam kind of walked through during the demo when he was talking about connected templates. But when creative naming is inconsistent, it can really create bottlenecks and a big liability across your platform as assets are used throughout the campaign workflow. So getting this right helps activation, and as we'll talk about next, it can really make or break creative level measurement. So standardizing this and making sure that the right information is passed from team to team to team across each of those workflows is really beneficial. And one of the reasons it's so beneficial is because to measure what assets and content work and don't, you need to be able to connect creative data to campaign performance data. As Adam talked about, you can use our platform to really do just this, distributing asset metadata to other tools and teams, so it's ready, detailed, and connected across your data sets. I know that was a lot pretty quickly, but we just want to get your wheels turning on some of the ways this integration could help your team. Before we go into Q&A, please take a moment to respond to a quick poll so we know what challenges resonate most for your team, including if you have something that you were thinking about or that this sparked that isn't in that list. We're finding new ways that this can help each day and are interested to hear what you might want to do with it.
One was, how long does this take to implement? So I'd say, and Adam, you can go into this a little bit more, but this is a no-code connector. So as Adam walked you through, the actual configuration of it is very customizable. It's set up for you already. So a lot of it is more making sure that you've identified what type of standards and taxonomy you want to be actually implementing and thinking through that process. Adam, I don't know if there's anything you'd add there.
I don't think so. Yeah, it's all about like what's your goal, and let's work backwards from that. And so with that, a lot of that happens to do with like the design of the template and what standard you want applied and what's going to be meaningful. Like you all just sort of filled that poll out, right? Let's start there and sort of see where gaps are, and then figure out what design of a template will look like, what a design of a template will look like. And really, once we get there, like if we have a username and a password, like we're in business like later that afternoon. And so like from our point of view, like we just need to sort of enter details in and configure it. And so like it's relatively simple for us to do.
There's a question about whether this is going to be, the presentation is going to be sent afterward. It will be emailed out for reference. So you'll have access to the full recording shortly. And then there was a question around who defines standards, or are they preset? I think we like to think about standards as something that works for your organization, right? So data standards aren't just something that Claravine sets on your behalf, but really are set up to work for you. But they're also set up to work with whatever system you're trying to integrate with. So as Adam showed how the connector was set up, there are obviously some realities and requirements around how you can integrate with Adobe Experience Manager or any of those other downstream technologies that he highlighted. So the reason we build connectors is to make sure that we can align with those requirements, but give you a lot of that customization you need. So as you're sending data to the right fields or pulling data from the right places, you can then customize what works within that system. So it's integrating the way you want it to. Adam, is there anything else you'd say?
I don't think so. Yeah, well, maybe one last thing, which I think you sort of pointed out, like one of the core philosophies inside of our product is that we know a lot of different businesses are different and data looks different, and standards then need to look different in order to accommodate all of those scenarios. And so one of the things you'll see in our product is a high degree of flexibility, so you can really define your own standard. We know it's unique to you, and we have tools that allow you to do that.
Great. Final one, and I know we touched on this a little bit in the presentation, but what other integrations do you have with Adobe? I know Adam mentioned Adobe Analytics. We also have a way of integrating with Adobe Workfront through our API. And then while we don't have a direct integration, I think a lot of what is done within our platform definitely has significant benefits for CDPs generally as well. So not a direct integration, but an area that we talk a lot with customers.
Perfect. Yeah, so that is everything that we have today. If you are interested in learning more, you can visit our website at the link there, claravine.com/AEM/ for more resources on our available connections with Adobe and how they all work together, and our blog for updates and industry news. If you are interested in booking a personal demo, send an email to marketing@claravine.com, or if you would like to ask about updating your current account, contact your CSM. Thank you everyone for joining us today, and I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.